Welcome to Ancient Geeks, a podcast about two geeks of a certain age revisiting their younger selves and all the geeky things that they used to love and still love. And we talk about, over the course of decades, what's improved, what's gotten worse in our estimation. That's going to be a lot of what we talk about today in this particular special episode, the 50th episode. I'm Tom Grant, and I'm as old as I've ever been.
I'm Stephen Taylor, and yeah, I remain old and geeky. It's all good, man.
Old and geeky. Does the geekiness make the oldness easier or harder?
It just reinforces it, right? I mean, quite clearly, here we are in our retired years making a podcast about science fiction and fantasy stuff. So I think
Right.
it's all a deeply self-reinforcing, cross-cutting cleavage or self-reinforcing cleavage, I guess, whatever you want to say. So there you go.
Okay. Well, before we get into our retrospective on the 50 episodes, what have you been doing geeky lately, Stephen?
So the geekiest thing I've been doing lately is reviewing our own podcast to figure out what to talk about
And saying,
today.
holy Christ, that's a critical mass of geekiness right there.
Here's the geekiest thing I've done. I figured out that while this is the 50th episode, it's actually the 52nd podcast we've done because we had a bonus in there and we had an episode 0.
Yeah. I wondered about bringing that up, but
No,
it's
it
the one
seems
that's numbered the 50th.
it's numbered 50th.
Right.
I now question the wisdom of episode 0 because it just throws a whole monkey wrench in the whole thing. But that's what comic books do these days. So I'll blame contemporary geekery. And
Right. Well,
we are
also like for people who are role-playing gamers,
yeah.
they'll do a session 0 where
I
they
see.
kind of set up what the campaign is going to be. So that was
As a,
our session 0.
as opposed to patient 0.
There you go.
Yeah, and then we're a couple of weeks away from a 1-year anniversary, which is kind of amazing.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I've been trying to read now for the third time the book Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. And I bounced off that book a couple of times, and I said, "By gum, I'm going to give it the old college try here once again." I've heard that once you get through the first section, it becomes a better book. I'm still struggling with it, I'll be honest. So we'll see if I get
You,
there.
you could give it the old grad school try, which is you read the first chapter, you skim all the others, and you read the conclusion so you can talk about it in seminar.
Right, and then you. And the old professor tries to do exactly that and then grill people about it
Yes,
to
yes, yes.
deflect their questions from how little you actually know about
No,
it.
no, my favorite one, I didn't read a book once, and the professor directly asked me,
What?
what did I think of the book? And all I could think of was, well, it didn't bowl me over. And then that's not a very good answer in seminar, but hey, these things happen.
That means it didn't physically strike you and knock you over,
It didn't impress me
which is a truthful statement.
because I didn't read it. Yeah.
Okay. We can't afford a soundtrack here for every episode, but we'd love to have one. If we could afford a soundtrack for our 50th episode, what would you choose as the song?
So at first I thought I was totally got to see on this, but then I realized, and I may have mentioned this song before in another context, so I hate it if I'm rerunning, but it's perfect. And in some ways, if I could make this at least the refrain, the theme song of this podcast, I would. It was the 1989 reunion song by the Monkees, That Was Then and This Is Now.
Oh, that's a good one. All right. I was also just thinking about like George Harrison's All Those Years Ago. Do you know that one?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but I picked Still Crazy After All These Years by Paul Simon.
That works. That works.
Yeah.
That's totally
All right.
perfect. I had a number of alternatives I will not get on the list, but yeah.
Okay. All right. So the main topic. So this podcast has been a lot of archaeology into our own past. And we're going to talk as the main
Or is it
topic.
psychiatry, Tom?
Yeah, I think, or primal screaming in some cases. uh, we'll get into that when we talk about the 70s superhero show. So anyway, the main topic, here, we're going to start with what we've learned about the past,
Yeah.
from revisiting it, and then we're going to do a look ahead. So look behind, look ahead, a look ahead to future episodes, what we'd like to do. So big question here to start. All right. So this is something we surely thought about before we began the podcast, but we've been laser focused on the topic, I think, kind of indirectly for the course of the last 49 episodes. Do you think that geek culture is better now, or it was better back when we first became geeks when we were kids or teenagers?
Yeah, and I'm going to interpret geek culture to include both the work product and then the atmosphere around the work product. Is
Yeah.
that kind of the way you look at it?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I
Absolutely.
mean, in some ways, and I found as I looked through the questions that and most of that you put together for this episode, I find some of this still, even after a year, almost a year of doing this, kind of difficult to disentangle because there is one of the themes in my mind has been the difference between being a young person where everything is new versus being an older person where you have all this experience to compare with,
Right.
and that makes it difficult in some ways to say. I think, I think I would say that it is better now. I think that in the sense that it's not just this niche thing as we keep talking about. It is more prevalent, and I think that also the capacity of things like just the internet in general, streamers and whatnot have expanded the access to this material, and has have allowed certain creators to do their work. And I also think that, of course, the community and fandom in some ways is better because you can interact with people like this podcast that could not have existed in
Hmm.
1975, or, you know, on Blue Sky or Facebook for all of the downsides of social media. One of the great things about social media, in my view, or just even blogs and Substacks or whatever the case may be, you can interact with people at a distance and find people that that share your interests. So I think that's an improvement. Although on the flip side of that, there's also, as I've mentioned before, a whole lot of negativity that therefore also
Right.
is there. So, you know, to me, and again, this is and I'm filibustering, I realize, and I apologize, but I'll say one more thing. I mean, when we were kids, the community was basically your handful of friends and maybe people that you saw at the comic shop, and now it's a much more expansive thing. But anyway, what's your thought on this topic?
Well, I think for one thing, there really was a geek culture. I think that the strands of it were more loosely woven than they are today. Like I go back to when my family had the bookstore. So
Right.
it started out with comic books
Hmm.
and science fiction and fantasy paperbacks. And then at one time, I made a strenuous argument to my mother and stepfather. You really have to have games here. That
Right.
they're not only I'm self-interested because I've discovered games like D&D and
Right.
Avalon Hill War Games and things like that, but also there's obviously a community of people who play these games who also buy comic books and
Hmm.
paperbacks. And make lots of Monty Python jokes and do other things
Right.
that indicate that there is a sort of loosely woven geek culture there that
Right.
we could make money based on that, and also bring people together. We also had like a separate room at one
Right.
point where people could play games, and then they'd wander over and buy other stuff. So there was definitely a geek culture there, though. Again, it was much looser. Like
Right.
people who did enjoy, let's say, Tolkien and other fantasy writers who were popular at the time didn't necessarily play D&D automatically.
Right.
And that's still true, and that's, for example, I think, we've seen the rise of anime in geek culture, and I still feel like that is more compartmentalized from other things than, let's say, enjoying Star Wars movies, which seems to be
Right.
universal. Everyone's
Right.
seen Star Wars
Yeah.
movies, but not everyone has seen Ghost in the Shell or Sailor Moon or things like
Right.
that.
And also, I mean, I make the joke about psychiatry or psychology or whatever. I mean, I think part of this, or just biography, um, I think that it's been interesting to me, not that this is any kind of startling revelation, to think about the two of us as we encountered these things and how one's biography does affect the way you view these things. So, like, you had one thing that's one very important difference, right? I moved in high school as a sophomore to California. So I had like this blew a hole in my social fabric for like a year and a half, kind of. So that really would have been peak time to be doing gaming, like before you can
Hmm.
drive, but you still kind of go hang out with friends. I didn't have that, was all gone because most of my D&Ding was in late middle school and maybe early high school. And then I did
Hmm.
find some friends later in high school that played RPGs, and we played some. But at that point, people were starting to have jobs and they were starting to have girlfriends, and even gamers sometimes have girlfriends, but sometimes they don't.
Even
Nonetheless,
gamers.
even gamers. But and so I think I kind of lost. And then you had the store, which would create an entirely
Yeah.
different context. I
Oh
actually,
yeah, it was a very unusual situation to
yeah,
be
yeah.
in.
But I mean, so in some ways, that's I think why I answer the question about at least now I can find people to interact with who are interested in things I'm interested in a way that I kind of couldn't when I was 16 years old, which is kind of
Yeah.
when normally you would expect to do these things. Anyway, but it is interesting. I think as we've talked about. Well, we'll move on from that.
Yeah. And so quality wise, like was the geek content then better than now or vice versa? That's a tough one
It is.
because certainly there's a lot more of it.
Yes.
I wouldn't say, for example, that role-playing games are worse than they were. In fact, they're a lot better than the
Right.
original D&D or Empire of the Petal Throne or Gamma World or some of the early role-playing games that came out. I mean, people have learned, and there's tons of good games out there. Not to diminish anything about the original ones. In fact, there's
Right.
a lot of deliberate effort to recapture what was great about first generation D&D. So it's just that there's a lot of good stuff out there now.
Well, and
So it hasn't gotten worse. There's always going to be schlock, but it's
sure.
always gotten worse. Other things, I don't know. I find since I talk a lot about reading both short and novel length science fiction. I'm not sure that necessarily like the quality of writing is better. So at least in that one attribute of the of
Right.
kind of the printed science fiction, I find like I'm wincing a lot of the writing, even among people who go on to get big
Hmm.
awards. I find it kind of worse than some of the earlier writers, though there were certainly some clunky writers back then too. So
I mean,
it's really hard to say.
I think I find it almost impossible to say. I mean, one, I don't know that I've sampled enough. I don't think I've sampled enough contemporary literature in a sort of a wide swath way to make an intelligent comment. I read things that I've liked.
Right.
And I have not, I'll admit, I have not consumed as much, relatively speaking, as much science fiction literature now as I did when I was young. That's all that I read, right?
Right. Right.
And so like I mean, it's something you suggested. Like I think the most recent truly that I got immersed in within the last year or so was Dan Simmons' Hyperion, the Cantos series.
Hmm.
That's from the 90s. So I don't know how do I put this into this context. I don't know. I thought the writing was quite good in that. Is that contemporary? It's contemporary relative to when I read Asimov back in the day. Um, and anyway, I just find it very difficult to totally make the comparison. I mean, obviously, when we talk about movies and TV, the effects are better. Sometimes the writing's better, sometimes it's worse. I think the thing that I think is positive about now, for good or for ill, because I think it can be for both, is that you're not trying to write just for a mass audience. As we criticize some of those 1970s shows that are really written in this very broad, simplistic kind of way. At least you can try to target to the audience you want to target to, which can lead to quality, but it can also lead to, maybe a little bit of
Hmm.
pandering.
Right. I think also too the availability of geek content
Yes.
is obviously much higher, and
Oh,
we'll talk
yes.
about the internet in a moment. But just to
Yeah.
talk about the physical
Hmm.
media as well. So if I wanted something like a game from a very small, obscure publisher.
Hmm.
Like there was a while, like one of the early role playing games, Tunnels and Trolls, had all these solitaire adventures you could play,
Hmm.
but they weren't like as big a publisher as TSR.
Right.
So if you went to a hobby shop that happened to have a few shelves of games in it, chances are you wouldn't find the Tunnels and Trolls content. Or if you're really in it, you got bit by the Lovecraft bug and you wanted to read other people in the Lovecraft circle that you have to like mail order from Arkham House Publishing or somebody else, and if you even know those people existed out there to provide you with that particular hit, versus now where Amazon and other
Yeah.
e-tail vendors are ready to provide it for you no matter what.
I would just hate to think what kind of terrible powers a radioactive Lovecraft bug would give you.
Yeah, I think Dr. Octopus would not be the only one with tentacles.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. And then fandom. Do you think fandom is better or worse?
As I alluded a moment ago, I mean, you can get a lot of negativity. It's impossible to go on Reddit or Facebook or anywhere else and not get a substantial amount of negativity about just about anything. Um, I don't know that it's really worse though. I mean, there's always fandom. I find again, it's hard to make too many generalizations, but there always is a reactionary element in fandom who like whatever the thing that they liked, if you try to do something else, the new thing has to be bad. That I find a little frustrating.
Yeah.
I mean, we did it with Star Trek: The Next Generation. We did it with Deep Space Nine. It's not a new phenomenon,
Hmm.
you know. Uh, but I don't know. I think it's just there's access to all facets of fandom now, and so there is a lot of negativity, but there's a lot of positivity too. You just got to filter, I guess. What do you think?
Yeah, I think because of the lack of face-to-face contact often in fandom now, through the internet, uh, I think that then people doing drive-bys where they just sort
Yeah,
of vomit out their awfulness are much more common than in past days when you had to, if somebody heckled you at the costume contest at a
right,
convention,
right.
you give them a few stern words afterwards.
Well, I mean, I think it used to only exist mostly in hate mail to people that was making the shows. Like I saw some
Yeah.
reference the other day about DS9 people uh, doing some bit with, I don't know if it was at a convention or it was online reading hate mail they got. It's like I think it was just so much more contained, which is true about so many things. I mean, there's always been, I think all of us. My general thought is that all this negativity, whether it's in fandom or it's in politics or just sports or whatever you want to pick, it's always kind of been there. It's just that it's contained. It was contained. You couldn't broadcast it, and now it's, as you say, but you can now. Right now, I can go on and if I want to see something ugly, I can see something ugly and reach lots of people very relatively quickly. Certainly more than I could if I was just ranting in my bedroom.
Hmm.
So there is that.
And,
I
and,
don't. Go ahead.
and it's not to say that people wouldn't be boorish. And so
Yeah.
here's an example. So there was a period when if you went to a comic book or a science fiction convention, you'd be on your guard against the Logan's Run fans. That there was a contingent of them who would play this live action game where some of them would dress up as Sandmen and some of them would dress up as runners and they would chase each other through the hotel. And all, kind of like, judgment about how goofy this was aside, they would like barrel into crowds of people
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
and knock into them and knock things over and so forth. They were boors, right? So that certainly existed, but it was much more limited and it was much more policed. People would crack
Right.
down on this and say, okay, none of this Logan's Run nonsense at the
Oh,
next convention.
oh, that sounds worse than someone being a jerk on Facebook, to be totally honest.
And there were certainly antipathies.
Sure.
So
Oh,
there were
yeah.
people who were nasty to each other, but
Yes.
but it was again harder to do it face to
It's
face,
just,
and
yeah.
also it kind of sometimes was almost more of an elite phenomenon. That
Yeah,
you had writers who were kind of nasty to each other.
sure.
Um, I think like
Harlan Ellison was always nice to everybody, Tom. Come on.
of course, and people were always nice to him.
Always, always.
I was just thinking of like the review that Joanna Russ, a science fiction author, did of the movie adaptation of A Boy and His Dog, and it is one of the most brutal takedowns I had read in my younger years. All right, so how has the internet changed things? We've alluded to that a little bit. Is there
Oh,
anything
I
else that you
mean,
think the internet has done for us or against us?
so the internet, as I've talked about before on the podcast, the
Is a
hunt is
series of tubes.
it's a series of tubes where the hunt is gone, right?
Yes.
The thing that I loved in some ways as a kid, but also bemoaned, was I wanted to find this book or this TV show or this episode or this comic issue or as you say, this game module or whatever. And you had
Right.
it was there was something about going to the used bookstore or trying to go to different stores or again a biographical difference. I lived at least for a while in relatively small towns before moving to Southern California, so that I often would have to go to Dallas from Waco to like really hunt for something because there were
Yeah.
multiple stores and bigger markets. And that's all gone, right? I mean, I think I may have made a passing reference the other day on the previous episode about I kind of miss just turn the TV on and whatever happens to be on is on, but and I can replicate it if I want to, but I have to kind of make it artificial. And the reality is I still when push comes to shove, the fact that I can watch any show that I want when I want to watch it, I can find movies that I want to watch,
Hmm.
whether, this is a big bonus, right? We could have done some of these episodes if the internet didn't exist. Well, we couldn't have a podcast if the internet didn't exist, but you know what I mean? So I think mostly it's a good thing, although I do kind of miss. There is something to be said about the fact that scarcity of a type makes life more interesting. So there is a little bit of a
Yes.
flood, but I do prefer this moment than I may never ever find that book I want to find ever because I can't.
Yeah. And we've talked about this a couple of times before, but it kind of removes the serendipitous
It
find
does. It
because
does.
because if the algorithm on Amazon is going to keep trying to figure out what you like and reproduce it over and over and over again, versus the serendipitous find of a book in a used bookstore,
Yeah.
or a comic on the pile of used comics,
Yes.
or a game on a shelf at a game store, and that would be outside of where the algorithm would now steer you.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, the podcast actually has been a little bit of an enhancement, and I think I'm skipping ahead to a response I'd written to another question, but I'll go ahead and say it
Right.
now. I mean, there have been some books and some authors that I've been more interested to go to bookstores now than I have been in years to just like hunt around to see if I can find them. Like some of this Moorcock stuff that's harder to find. I might could find it on Amazon. It's kind of weird. I don't want it bad enough to like just hunt online to find it, but if I could find it, like we went to a flea market a couple of weeks ago and I found a whole bunch of Moorcock books and I
Hmm.
gladly bought them. And actually, he's someone's harder to find than others, so that makes it a little more interesting for me. But I
Yeah.
mean, and I bought more physical media because of this podcast. Also because I divested myself of a bunch of books and DVDs when I moved, and now like I have plenty of space. So I'm like I'm back to back ratting to a degree, I guess.
Right.
But anyway, yeah,
Yeah, and there are things I think overall it's a net good, but there are
yes,
things on the fringes like
sure,
the hunt
yes,
that get diminished. I'd also say there are other things too. I found since we've been reflecting a lot more on the past versus the present over the course of the last year. So book covers. So we're
hmm
talking about finding books. Book covers were actually a big part of that. The art on the book,
right,
and that is becoming less and less prevalent. That you have these top-notch artists doing book covers, and therefore when you pick something up, you say, "Ooh, I really like this Michael
yeah,
Whelan or Brothers Hildebrandt cover. I wonder what's inside because the book
right,
cover is so suggestive." Nowadays, we have book covers that are intentionally very simplistic, not like depicting a scene out of the
right.
book in some detail, just because they need something that looks good as a thumbnail when you're scrolling through your e-reader or
Maybe
scrolling
so.
through
I
a
feel like
website.
that. I feel like I let die off in the late 70s, early 80s, though. I don't know that I take your point, and you may be correct that some of this is certain kinds of iconography for thumbnails. I just feel like a lot of what you're talking about died a while back, but maybe that's just totally subjective on my part.
Yeah. And the other thing I'll say is that it was also easier to find things that were gems that then weren't immediately overpriced. So, if you ran across a copy of Green Lantern, Green Arrow number 76.
Hmm.
Kind of the first, Denny O'Neil, Neil Adams issue that did this classic run that was very coveted. You'd say, "Oh my God, look at this!" Versus now, like everything is all monotonically priced because every vendor out there on the internet is looking at every other vendor and pricing
Hmm.
something like that accordingly. So if you want a physical copy of this, it's much harder to kind of get it as a steal. So and again, that's on the fringes, but I think that was part of the pleasure of being younger. Though on the other hand, all these comics are increasingly available, which is
Yeah, the flip
through
side
the
is
internet, through the app, the
through
DC
those
app or the
apps,
Marvel app.
it's, I've read things I never would have been able to afford to read even now, because I'm not going to invest in that kind of stuff. But yeah, that's I mean, that part, again, I love that. And like we did some of those episodes about comics, the early Superman, early Batman stuff. I mean, if we'd had to get that individually, we never would have done those episodes.
Right, right. I wish that some of the non DC, non Marvel comics were a little more easily available, a little more
Yes.
cheaply available
Yeah.
today via the interwebs. All right. Are there any aspects of geek culture that you think have grown more popular than you expected it to be when you got older?
Yeah, I never would have expected the dominance of superheroes as sort of the core of movies, the way it's been the last however
Yeah.
long it's been now,
Yeah. Number one
decade
with a
plus.
bullet for me, too.
Yeah, yeah.
And I remember Jack Kirby back in the 70s, I want to say, making some comment about, someday superhero movies are going to be huge. When you go to your multiplex, there'll be half the movies will be superhero movies. And everyone said, come on, Jack. Here we are.
Here we are.
Here
Yeah,
we
here we
are.
are.
Uh, I also want to say I think role-playing games are more popular than I thought they would be. It was something that was very niche when I was in my teens and has become much bigger, not just like the tabletop role playing games, but the electronic
Yeah, I was gonna
versions
say
of them.
video games, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Like there are so many, like look at my list of games that I purchased over the years that are, in my Steam collection.
Hmm.
How many of those are effectively some reproduction of a tabletop role-playing
Right,
experience?
right.
Even the real-time ones are using all the conventions of
Hmm.
tabletop role-playing games, hit points and so
Right,
forth.
exactly.
Um, are there any things that you expected to be more popular eventually and are not as much?
The main thing I think is I always find it kind of curious that Star Trek has this sort of mid-level of popularity versus something like Star Wars.
Yeah,
I always expected it maybe to grow a little bit, but it clearly does not have the same. It has a mass appeal, but it doesn't have that same level of mass appeal. And even when people these days have whatever pop culture Star Trek references exist, they're mostly still back to the original show. To some degree, they're TNG, but after that, it just doesn't penetrate.
yeah, I agree with that. And I don't have an explanation for
I
why,
don't either.
but I definitely disappointed about that.
Yeah,
I also think that science fiction is less popular than I hoped it would be
that's fair.
yeah,
Yeah,
compared to science fantasy.
right.
A lot of science fantasy, and I would classify Star Wars as possibly being science
Yeah, I
fantasy
think there's
or
some truth to
Doctor
that.
Who or
Yeah, yeah.
other things. I also think the classic fantasy that's not Tolkien,
Hmm.
it surprises me some of that hasn't been mined
Yeah, I
because I
agree.
think I think commercially, I mean, they don't have to pay as much maybe to the author or the estate of the author
Hmm.
for some of the really old stuff, and it's still a lot of it holds up really well. So
Yes.
I'm not sure, given the boom of interest in fantasy, that it hasn't kind of bubbled up from all the great fantasy that was already there.
Yes. Yes.
So how would you rate the quality of taste of your younger self?
Clearly, it was impeccable. I mean, what else are you gonna say? Everything that I like was awesome.
Yeah.
I don't know. I really I have a hard time even making this judgment. There's um, weirdly to try to maybe be a bit more meta for a second. I'm having a harder time trying to figure out why I think something's good and why it's not. I know it's almost like that,
Mhm.
the age old like what's pornography, you know when you see it. I can be more specific than that, and I've meant to write about it to maybe think about it more, but I haven't done it yet. Clearly, I think what I would say about my younger self is obviously, and we've talked about this many, many times, I would consume things because they were science fiction, not because they were good, right?
Right. Right.
Like, I liked Lost in Space, but Lost in Space is not it's not very good, right? I liked the $6 Million Man. I liked The Incredible Hulk. I watched this stuff, Buck Rogers, that we haven't talked about really yet. But I often would watch it just because it was there. So it's kind of in some ways hard to say. I mean, I think that maybe I were to think about things that I liked literature wise or comic wise that I think are good. I don't know that I liked a whole lot of terrible things. Um, so I mean, I think I was fine, and I think it helped, build the basis for the future. But I think I've become, to somewhat anticipate the next question, which is how things change. I think I've become more selective in some ways. Although I also have been fully aware that sometimes that which you have fallen in love with, you're willing to forgive, even in my dotage here.
Yeah.
And maybe in some ways that you're not about certain things. But I think it depends on the thing you fell in love with when you fell in love with it, right?
Right.
I've one thing I've come to recognize is a lot of this is often there are some objective things one can say about why something is good. The acting, the cinematography, the direction, the writing, the special effects, the ideas. We can talk about all, but there's also a lot of subjectivity of all this, just things that you love because you love them, and it's kind of hard to say why. How about yourself?
Yeah, I don't think that that's necessarily a question of taste
Right.
as it is of hunger.
Do you mean watching just stuff because it's on? Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. Sure,
Yeah.
that's
I
that's
mean,
hunger and not taste.
what you said was you
Yeah.
realized at the time it wasn't very good.
Right.
Like so I'll pick on a TV show from that era, Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea.
Right.
I would occasionally watch Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea if I were bored at home and I
Right.
couldn't think of anything else to do. And it was on, not a lot, it would
Hmm.
be really desperate. And, there's an episode I'm watching and there's a guy in a lobster man costume that looks
Hmm.
ridiculous. And
Right.
he's yet again trying to take over the submarine, the Sea View, which
Sure.
seems like every episode that was the plot. Um, and I might have turned it off, right? It
Right.
just at some
Right.
point I was like, oh, come on, what am I wasting my time on this garbage? I was willing to try a lot of things,
Right.
and maybe I don't know. I don't know if I'm less likely now to try just anything.
Oh, I think
Uh,
that's the case. Oh, no, I
yeah.
never watched Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, but for me, it was Land of the Giants or Time Tunnel. It's like, and
Oh yeah.
I found them boring, but I would watch them sometimes because it's ostensibly science fictiony.
Right. It
I
was
mean, I
amazing
think
on Time Tunnel that every single time they shifted, they
mhm.
wound up at a major historical event. You
It's,
know,
well,
it was never like a field in Montana
right, right, right.
where nothing's
Exactly.
happening. Yeah.
Just so happens. I, no, and I think this links back to your question about the internet. I think the internet, while you can't, it's kind of weird. I guess you can kind of find out about things. I can find out about things through a podcast, through a Substack, maybe even through social media that I didn't know about. So in that way,
Right.
that kind of encounter is in some ways enhanced. But the kind of encounter where you're just like turn the TV on, that doesn't exist anymore, right? I
Right.
never turn the TV on and not know what I'm going to watch.
Hmm.
It just doesn't exist anymore. That's gone.
Right. I also realize, like, when I'm reading something, like
Hmm.
said I was reading this Susanna Clark novel, that I might reach a certain point in the book and say, is this going to get better? Is it worth sticking it out?
Right.
And that really wasn't a decision point in the past. And so I'm not quite sure how to square this with the question, were my tastes better then or now?
Yeah, I don't.
But I certainly could reach out more and ask other people virtually, what did you think about this? Should I continue through
Right.
this? And I'll do that. And there's a part of me that feels a little guilty. Like
Yes,
I should like stick with it on my own terms. I shouldn't be
that's right.
influenced by other people's decisions, or statements.
I am more prone not to finish things than I used to be. That's true. I honestly, I do think that if we're going about tastes, but I don't know how much it directly links to genre stuff. I mean, I think that
Right.
I think my overall tastes have gotten more sophisticated in terms of especially things like acting and the production value of certain kinds of properties. And I watch things I wouldn't have watched as a even a young adult or
Right.
20s. I mean, if I were going to make a list of my top five TV shows of all time, none of them would be genre shows. At least,
Hmm.
well, if I thought they were the best. Now, if I were going to talk my favorites or the most entertaining, yeah, it would be a different list, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
I think that I don't know, to pick on something we talked about last week. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind two of the top five shows I've ever seen are Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, and I would rate them as higher quality than the next generation Star Trek, the original series. Although I think probably TOS is one of my favorite like entertaining things, but
Right.
it's just not in the same. It's a different list, and that applies to film and other kinds of things too. But I just so that's evolved. But I would hope that in my late 50s I would have some sensibility about these things. But who knows?
Are there any other ways in which your tastes have changed?
I mean, there has to be a panoply of ways in which my tastes have changed, but I can't think of a succinct way to summarize it, especially as it pertains to genre, because I do think that I do find here maybe is a way to think about it. I thought about this just the other day before I even got this list. There's part of me that still prefers like anywhere from the late 70s to the mid to late 80s Marvel comics to the ones I'm reading now. And I don't even know
Yeah.
quite why. I don't know if it's familiarity or if it's just the sort of general approach to the properties that. But but I don't know what that means. How much of that's just age. I find a lot of this an interesting conversation psychologically. It's like how much, again, is just because you got locked in on something at a certain point in your life and it's comforting. I don't know. How about yourself?
Yeah, it's interesting you brought that up because I certainly don't embrace superhero comics as much as I used to.
No, that's true.
And I think part of that is number one, it's very hard to re-enter the flow of
Oh, yes. I've
stories
tried.
now. And like there'll be characters there or references to plot developments or whatever.
Yes.
They're just mystifying. And it feels like the authors are doing less to try to help people who have either disengaged for a while or new to it, kind of jump back in feet first. I find a lot of the comics nowadays just a little baffling, and that's not a great
Yeah.
feeling. It's not like you went from the 1960s with Spider-Man to the 1970s, and I'm not
Right.
saying these characters should never change, but like if you picked up a Spider-Man comic and he's fighting a different hero, I'm sorry, a
Right.
different villain, then it's still okay. You're still able to kind of grok what's going on in the story.
Well, I mean, part of the problem, I mean, this is just, it's just math, Tom, but it's
Right.
actually kind of shocking when you stop and think about it. Because again, when I was first encountering all these comics and trying to sort of sort out, who is the Spider-Man, who's Doctor Octopus, or who's the Green Goblin, there was maybe, I don't know, if it's like less than 10 years worth of material, there's like what 50 or 60 years worth of stuff now.
Right.
It's almost it's that makes it just so it feels like it should be easier to jump in, like was able to jump in when we were kids. But
Hmm.
I think that really makes a big difference. It's just a lot, so much, and they've had to kind of keep the stuff going while keeping some level of continuity, but also adding all kinds of new levels. I mean, here's a simple example. I know that the White Queen, Emma Frost, has somehow become a good guy. I don't know how that happened.
Right.
I can
Like
kind of guess, but
I
it's
guess
like
you could sort of run with it, but it's still weird.
you got to. There's
Yeah.
certain things stuck in your head, right?
Yeah.
And
But I would also say that a lot of the blame certainly falls on the shoulders of the crossover stories, the
oh
the
yeah, that makes
massive
it even
crossover
more
stories,
difficult. It makes it much more
because
difficult.
these created these complex backstories to everything,
Yeah.
like House of M.
Hmm.
And I sometimes when I went back and read those crossovers, and that's a little challenging in and of themselves because there's a lot happening, and a lot of it's spread over multiple books, and trying
Right.
to figure out what you have to read versus what would be maybe a little fun to read, but
Right.
but certainly optional is a little bit of a chore. But Other times I would read something and it was really good. Like I really liked the Superior Spider-Man,
Hmm.
when Dr. Octopus was in
Right.
his brain, and
Right.
so that was good. But there were also things that were really bad,
Right.
and
Right.
not to pick on any in particular, but some of those I just felt like I just wasted my time reading this
Sure.
just so that I could come up to speed about why the Hulk is dead or whatever the hell is going on.
Right. No, I think well, there's two things that I think frustrate me. One, and this is more of a DC problem than a Marvel problem, is they reset their continuity like multiple times. So I don't even
Right.
know sometimes what continuity these things happened in. And the second thing that drives me mad that both comic book companies did, and I understand, I guess, the business model, but if you restart the numbering, I never know where the hell I am, right? How
Hmm.
many Avengers number ones are there? There's too many. I don't even sometimes know. Well, if I have to Google to figure out which volume and what year this thing started, it's just like it's difficult. I don't like that.
Right.
I mean, that's crotchety old man yelling from his porch, I guess. But I don't. I wish that at least the numbering and some of them went back to the old numbering. I think there's some DC stuff that's gone back to the old numbering. But, there's like multiple Fantastic Four number ones, and it just gets so confusing as to what's what.
Right. Right.
Anyway,
All right. What do you think makes something good?
yeah, this is this thing that I'm struggling with. I mean, I obviously the obvious answer is good writing and good art and good cinematography and good acting. And
Yeah, but that's
but I don't know. I don't, and it becomes very difficult for me to say. I mean, I don't. Like you and I disagreed about the quality of certain things, and that's all well and good, and taste and experiences are subjective. But I haven't figured out, and in some ways, that's what art is about, right? There's no good answer, no pun intended. But I find that I don't know that I really have a better answer than I used to have. How about
yeah.
yourself?
Well, yeah, and I don't want to like fall into the tautology of saying it's good because it's good.
Right, right,
So I would say things that to me are appealing are where the creator is really trying.
right,
They have an earnestly held vision of creating something, and maybe they have constraints. It's a low budget
right,
1950s monster movie, or it's something that a writer, an artist in the Marvel bullpen are trying to churn out on deadline.
right.
Whatever, whatever the constraints are, but they're genuinely trying to produce something good. I think it's often true that I don't want them to overdo it. Like we talked about the crossover
Right,
stories and everything's a cosmic battle and so
right,
forth. I think that's completely unnecessary and counterproductive. And I want them to do something new. And this is where I want to make the Star Wars versus Star Trek comparison. Star Wars for a very long time did nothing new.
mm-hmm,
Yes, they went back and told the story of the Clone Wars and how the Empire got started and so forth, but it was still the same kind of story.
right,
With even like too many of the same characters. Oh, look, here's R2D2 and C3PO.
right,
Like
right, right,
who needed that, to be honest? Uh, where Star Trek, was certainly there are people on a spaceship and they're going from planet to planet, but this planet presents an interesting moral conundrum,
right,
or they're facing off against the Doomsday Machine and this, extrapolation of the terrible logic of the Cold War in a science fiction setting, or this is an espionage sort of story that they're doing, and really, Star Wars didn't break out of that until probably like The Mandalorian,
mm-hmm,
which was this sort of spaghetti westernish
mm-hmm.
bounty hunter story, and certainly Andor.
Andor, yeah,
Andor, completely different.
yeah,
And way better for it, and Star Trek, of course, had Deep Space Nine and other things that
right,
diverged from the original mold. I want more of that, right? That to me is
right.
good, right? I don't want everything to just be constantly repeat of the same things. And that's weird for me to say that, saying I also liked comic books from the 60s and 70s,
Right.
which were a lot of the same story
Yeah.
over and over again.
Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, look, without any doubt, I believe that it is important to have new, unique, and different twists on things if you're going to continue even within the context of a franchise. The one of the things I struggle with, and I think we have somewhat divergent views on, but I think that, and I don't have a really great way of saying this, but because I think about like I understand, by the way, why your views, and I agree. The third season of Strange New Worlds was not as good as the first two, and I think we could probably identify various reasons why that's the
Hmm.
case. But having recently rewatched, I'm almost finished with this rewatch of, or finishing the watch of Enterprise. I watched Voyager and DS9 within the last several years, within the last 5 to 6 years, and a good bit of TNG and a good bit of TOS. And so, in some ways, they're all kind of in the same formula, and it can be done within that formula. And that's fine. It's still not Andor. Andor is like an elevation. Andor is almost like his own category in my mind, right? That kind of elevation is rare. Um, I mean, but again, I like comic books, right? I don't mind reading similar stories because if done well,
Hmm.
if compelling. But again, what that secret ingredient is kind of hard for me to identify. I suppose if I knew what it was, I could write this stuff. It is a weird mixed bag because I think you can do things similarly and still be good, but it probably doesn't transcend to another level like Andor does.
Right.
Um,
I think it's also necessary to really love what you're creating
yes.
and not condescend to it. So, since I'm going to be teaching this class on Western cinema,
Hmm.
Westerns, not all of the Western world, but
Right. Right.
Western movies, I was reading through this book, which is Brian Garfield's Western Films: A Complete Guide. It's an encyclopedic look at a lot of Western movies, at the time. Like he writes like a 1 to 4 paragraph review of each one. The
Hmm.
man has strong opinions,
Sure.
and they're fun to read his opinions on a lot of movies and also to get recommendations. But he has a great introduction, and he goes through the history of Western cinema. And one of the things that he says is he doesn't like contemporary Westerns because he finds them condescending to the material.
Hmm.
Everything's, a fresh new look, like, we're deconstructing and exploding the Western myth and so forth. It's like, well, yeah, but, at some point, what do you actually love about it? Why
Hmm.
are you making a Western? And I kind of feel that that is the essence of what makes something good in geek culture too. Like one of the things that really bothered me about Flash Gordon, the movie, was
Hmm.
it just seemed to not love space opera,
Right.
or pulpy stories or whatever. It was just
Right.
this sort of weird. It only touched the subject matter with 1,000 foot pole, and then mostly to kind of make it look ridiculous. And I had that sense when we rewatched Buckaroo Banzai, and that to me kills my definition of what makes something
See,
good.
and the funny thing, I kind of got the impression that people that made Buckaroo Banzai loved what they were doing.
I love
But I
what they
would,
were doing, but they didn't. I didn't get the feeling they loved that sort of pulp story. Maybe they did. I did, and
I don't know. I mean, part of
but
the
certainly
problem.
Flash. Let's stick to Flash Gordon.
No, Flash. Well, here I'll say two things, and one maybe a slight disagreement. I don't know. It's
Hmm.
kind of hard to know whether they love it or not. How about this? I think a lot of people who love stuff make bad stuff, but I think that there are examples, and I think Flash Gordon fits what you're saying, which is why do they make Flash Gordon? They made Flash Gordon not because they loved Flash Gordon or science fiction. It's because Star Wars made a bunch of money and they had access to a property and they made a movie.
Hmm.
And I think, although I do think some of the aesthetic choices are not because of love or lack of love, I think Dino De Laurentiis and his production crew have bad taste.
Right.
Which we talked about a little bit in the Lynch's Dune, and you can go back to Barbarella and maybe some other
Hmm.
examples. And again, it's subjective, I suppose, but
But it's not ipso facto a good thing to deconstruct, to reinvent,
no,
to explode,
no,
whatever. Right. Like Batman for a new generation. That can be done well, and that can be
yeah,
done very poorly. But
sure,
there's also sort of like a little perhaps implicit condescension to it that Batman has to be
right,
deconstructed or
right,
imploded.
right, right. Anyway, yeah, I do think that I think the main problem becomes when producers are trying to cash in on a fad that they don't understand.
Right. Just tell a ripping yarn.
Yes, yes,
Okay, I think we already talked about whether it was easier to fall in love with something when you were young, but I just want to
yeah. I
make
mean,
sure that we,
I can fall pretty hard now, but it was obviously easy to fall in love with certain things when you're a kid.
yeah. So, what surprised you the most when you were revisiting a particular book, comic book, movie, or TV show?
This was I actually a weirdly hard question. One specific example, so we mentioned Flash Gordon. That movie was really more weird and dire than I remembered. It was just not as much
Yeah,
fun as I expected. For all the campy
I
ridiculousness.
kind of wanted to take a shower after watching.
It's a weird movie. It was
It's
really
a
weird.
weird, yeah, but not in a
I
good way.
all of
I love weird. That's
my memory is the part that the part that I think I wanted the whole movie to be Brian Blessed just being ridiculous, and that
Brian
wasn't
Blessed.
exactly.
He has the perfect name for who he
He
is.
does
And
absolutely
Blessed.
exactly. I mean, I also think I noticed, and this is just partially my. I think I noticed a lot more of the sexism of a lot of this stuff,
Oh yeah.
and a lot of the sort of notion that clearly the normative way things are white dudes. I noticed that more
Yes.
than I did as a kid, and of course, obviously, I noticed all the smoking. So there's
We should
that.
have the no smoking label
It's
on
just
the
hilarious.
podcast.
It's just hilarious to me. I mean, it is. I guess I did note. I mean, I've noticed this with Star Trek over the years, but you get it somewhat in like Planet of the Apes or some how even properties and people who are forward thinking, how they are still influenced so much by the moment in which they're writing, right?
Yeah.
There's some profound sexism in Star Trek, right? Just I'm not
Oh
and
yeah.
forget the Turnabout Intruder, which is the worst example. But I saw some just today on Facebook that reminded me of this. Someone was commenting on there's the episode with Apollo,
Yes.
and Scotty is smitten with one of the other officers. That's the one that ends up staying with Apollo. And
Mm.
there's a line of dialogue in which Kirk and McCoy and Spock are talking about Scotty's crush on this woman. And Kirk says, "Well, I'm about to lose an officer," meaning that if they get married, she's gonna have to quit the service. I'm like, what?
Yeah. Yeah.
But that was the way, you gotta go home and make babies at that point if you get married. You can't be in Starfleet. It just,
You
it's
can't fit
amazing.
into the miniskirt
Oh,
anymore.
well, that's absolutely impossible.
Yeah.
So that's the real issue, I suppose. There's no maternity miniskirts, but regardless, it's just that stuff really sticks out at me sometimes, and it's so easy to ignore it, but it's all there, right? So that I think that may be the biggest thing.
Yeah. So I would say, first of all, the good B movies really do stand up
Hmm.
still and are enjoyable.
For example,
It came from outer space.
okay,
Yeah, I thought that was a very good movie, and I
hmm
think it's not high art
right.
but for what it was trying to do, it was really good. The original 1954 Godzilla is a
No, that one,
really good
yeah,
movie,
I agree.
right? And I found myself outside of our conversation, like
Hmm.
telling other people about it, saying like,
Right,
well, it's certainly skewed a little bit by uh, going to Japan that I would then talk
sure,
to people about Godzilla movies or explain why I visit the giant Godzilla head in Tokyo. But it just really struck me as like, damn, this is a good movie. If you just kind of embrace it for what it is, it's wonderful. I mean, the campy stuff like the giant claw, still is hilarious, but the good stuff is still good.
hmm
Uh, I think a lot of the again, classic science fiction and fantasy also really endure. I was really struck rereading Moorcock and Tolkien,
hmm
how enjoyable they were. I think they're different sorts of writers.
yes,
Uh, again, I'll use the phrase "ripping yarn." I mean, that's really Moorcock, but a ripping yarn just jam packed with
sure,
crazy ideas. Tolkien with his with the just the narrative of what happens in Lord of the Rings, plus all the backstory behind it and that he created for Middle Earth. Terrific, right? That is literature that stands the test of time, proverbially.
hmm
And the last thing, again, I mentioned this earlier, is just how omnipresent D&D is. Even
yes.
if it's not labeled D&D, it's
Stranger Things.
everywhere. Yeah, yeah. Is there anything you wound up liking more on the rewatch or the reread or
I
the re whatever?
so I think the I appreciate the 1960s Batman more than I did.
Me too.
I was impressed with its production value in a way that I had not thought about before.
Hmm.
And so that really struck me. And I've said this multiple times in the podcast, but I think, especially because of looking at the 70s, the original series of Star Trek's production really struck me as a higher quality. I mean, I knew it was there, but I really, it's so easy to see the camp or to see the bad SF effects, excuse me, or the bad model work, or at least relative to now, right?
Right.
But really, for what it was at the time, is I think even more impressive than I thought it was. But the Batman, I think, was the thing that really struck me the most of the things that I'd been very familiar with before, but then revisited now.
Yeah. And I said this, way back when we did the Batman episode, that this was a time when people in Hollywood had not yet mastered how to make something that's appealing to both children and adults.
Hmm.
I think Disney certainly, during the golden age of movies like Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast and so forth, really kind of set, an example for everyone to follow about how to make a movie that both kids and,
Right.
and parents would like to watch. But Batman, was at a time when there were these syrupy, stupid kids shows, and this was clearly pitched partially at kids, but it was
Yes.
also a primetime TV
Yes.
show where they had to crank
Yes.
out 2 half-hour episodes every week. And to do that and still have something that was watchable for grown-ups and fun,
Hmm.
I think was a pretty great accomplishment.
Agreed. Agreed.
Anything else that you like more?
I think that covers the main things that I like, that really struck me that I liked more. I'm sure
Yeah,
there are other, but yeah.
I think that I mentioned two things. I like Superman as a character more
Okay.
now than I did at the time, and it was
No, I think
because
that's
of
true. Yeah.
the Kurt Swan era goofiness
Yeah, I
of
didn't care for that.
Superman stories. But not just that the stories were better, the characters were better drawn, but just the idea of Superman, I think, has made a bigger impression on me than it did when I was a kid. And I think Tolkien, I liked Tolkien a lot
Hmm.
when I first read it. I did fall in love with it, but I can appreciate him more now
Hmm.
than I did when I first read it.
I'll add Blade Runner. Blade Runner, I think I appreciate
Oh,
more. Every time I see that movie, I appreciate it more. And I think this particular uh, attempt was important
okay.
to my appreciation.
Now we go to the treacherous question. Was there anything now that you look back on and you say, why did I like that?
I don't think anything quite fit that. I think that I had even less. I never was a big TV Superman guy, but that it lowered my estimation of that further. I think the
Yeah.
closest example, I mean, I think I always have said that I love Buckaroo Banzai. I think I kind of still do, but I think I see its flaws more than I did. And it was,
Hmm.
and so it is, I think it's ticked down in my estimation. I don't think I saw, we did anything where I just went, why did I like this? I don't think we did anything that fits that category. Did you?
We haven't hit that yet. It's not to say that something like that isn't lurking out there somewhere to say, "Ooh, I really got into that for a while, and I can't explain to my adult self why my younger self liked it." No, there are things I really dislike even more. I think like
Right.
Lynch's Dune movie
Yeah,
or
well, that was new for me, but yeah.
the 70s superhero shows.
Yeah, I think I mean that may fit. I mean, like I said, I like the $6 Million Man in particular was one of my favorite shows as a kid. And
Yeah.
I understand why I liked it, but it's like, yeah, exactly. And then I'll admit, like, this is my big confession, but I think I said at the time, when I was very young, the Donnie Marie Star Wars thing, I listened to it on a cassette tape over and over again because it basically was Star Wars. But I mean, obviously it's ridiculous.
Right. Yeah.
So there's that.
Yeah, and I put down on my notes variety shows are even goofier
Oh, they're just,
than
yeah.
now experiencing them than when I was younger and experienced
Yes,
them.
agreed.
Any favorite new discoveries?
So yeah, so I'm gonna give something that was new from the past. Alien, I think, because I've never seen Alien, and I
Yeah.
was thoroughly impressed with the movie Alien. I enjoyed Aliens, but Alien really, really, I think I was very, very impressed with. And then I
Yeah.
really, in an honorable mention, you've already said it, but I'll mention Godzilla in the original Japanese impressed me in ways I didn't expect.
Yeah, and I'll say Blake Seven. I really enjoyed
I'm
that.
glad you
That
did.
was a great discovery. So thank you for introducing me to that.
No, it's been fun to do some things we hadn't done. I mean, I enjoyed the
Right.
monster movie thing. I'm not going to become a monster movie aficionado, but I enjoyed it at the time.
That's fine. You don't have to like everything. Um,
Oh, that's a relief.
okay. And anything from the present? We did a few things from from the
So,
present, like Andor, and
yeah. So, I mean, Godzilla minus one was very impressive. And again, I
yeah.
wouldn't have watched it if you hadn't suggested it. So I was very impressed with that. Andor is the top. It may be the best
Oh
thing I
yeah,
watched last year. And then, of course, as we all know from last week, I love Pluribus. So these are new things that I really, really, really liked.
yeah. And for me, it's Andor.
Yeah.
That show really impressed the hell out of me.
Yes.
So just to kind of look back and on the podcast itself, do you think we've covered anything too much or too little?
So I decided that it's impossible for me to answer this question because I don't know that it matters. In the sense that I think that one, there's just so much to cover, right? There's so much to cover. There's so many movies, there's so many books, there's so many TV shows that how do you even judge? So I don't think so. But and I would be all open to any input from the audience if they think that we
Oh,
covered things
absolutely.
too much or too little, or things we haven't thought about yet. But I just don't know that there's a good answer to this question. What about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've been hitting a pretty good balance of the different media,
Hmm.
TV shows, movies, books. Maybe I like to do books a little more.
Sure.
Comics. We haven't done really many games. I kind of look forward to doing that. Just to get ahead of ourselves here. Um, Anything that you thought was really fun to do
So
as an episode?
I enjoyed doing this period, and so I mean, obviously, anything about Star Trek, I really enjoy talking about because I want to talk about it. The variety show thing, or anything we kind of make fun of things without upsetting people, is kind of fun. Um, and
We didn't
then
get an angry email from anybody who
I
said,
don't think we've gotten
I
angry
really
about
love that Paul Lynde
that's
Halloween
right, Halloween
special.
special. How dare you from the little end heads? Um, but really, in some ways, like the new stuff is the most fun because I so desperately want to talk about it that I just
Yeah.
appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah. Good point. Yeah.
So
I mean,
there's that.
for me, the variety show episode was a lot of fun.
It was.
And anything where we introduced each other to something was
Yeah, that's
fun.
fun. I like that yeah, I agree with that.
Anything that was significantly unfun.
Nothing was unfun. I mean, watching some of those clips with the variety show thing wasn't that much fun. It was fun. I mean, it was just, we had
Right.
to joke about torture. I think that some of them are more work than others, right?
Yes.
And, whether it's a season of television or multiple movies or reading something I haven't read or need to reread it to talk about it intelligently. That's just more work, but it doesn't make it, I don't think it's hard. I find comic books a little more challenging sometimes to talk about, and we talked
Hmm.
about this offline the other day because it is so visual that I have
Right.
a harder time maybe talking about the way I would like to. Um, and I think this is not quite what you're asking, but I'll go ahead and throw it in.
No, go
I
ahead.
think one of the challenges of doing this is always trying to figure out how much detail I need to go into or that we need to go into to actually talk about a subject. I mean, I tend to assume people have watched, read, or consumed what we're talking about, but I
Mhm.
also know that sometimes you need to prompt memories about certain things. And occasionally, when I re-listen to these things, I think, I didn't explain what I was talking about well enough, and maybe it made sense and maybe it didn't. But I mean, on balance, I find this a pleasure and easy.
Yes.
And the only challenge is time. But I feel like that's just life, right?
Yeah. Even when you're retired.
That's right. That's right.
The only thing I would cite as being a tough topic to cover were the 70s superhero shows because it was, close to an hour commitment to watch an
Right.
episode. We had to
Yeah.
watch at least a couple of episodes per show,
Hmm.
and they were often so boring and just so cynical. It's just the lackluster effort that they made, And at the time we did that episode, I said I could see in my head the network executive like, these kids, they love their funny books. Just give them whatever. That was the only one I felt pain, and I would wonder like, am I going to make it through this episode of the original
Yeah.
Spider-Man TV series?
I would note as sort of as I part of this is a little bit of it's some of it's self-discovery and some of it's discovery about you as a friend. And I
Yeah.
realize that whenever you default to an evil person, it's usually some cigar chomping 50s dude.
That's true. That's true. You can blame it on J. Jonah Jameson, I
That's
think.
right. That's right. That's right.
Parker.
Uh,
All right. So we always talk about merch. We're not going to, talk about
no.
merch in the same way, but how much merch at the end of the day did you still have
I
from
mean,
your younger years?
I have I guess quite a bit still. But I don't have what I don't have are like a lot of the toys from my youth. I do have some, right? I've mentioned my Star Trek action figures that my mother kept
Hmm.
and gave to me, but I don't have all of them. I don't have all my superheroes, which I kind of wish I had. But I still have, the magazines and the books and, I don't have all the models that I used to have. I don't have any of my role-playing games. They're all gone. So I guess in that sense, and a lot of books I got rid of to my chagrin now.
Hmm.
But so I have a decent amount. I don't have, but I got some stills. I've got some other things. How about yourself?
Yeah, I don't really have a lot. I've alluded to this before. I've gone through various purges over the
Hmm.
years. Sometimes by necessity, more normally by choice. It's
Right,
just like how long do I want to hold on to this stuff and drag it around the country? So there are a couple of things I regret having
right,
discarded over the years or sold, and I wound up repurchasing them. Like
right.
there was a fantasy war game that I had, and I really love the background for it. It's RuneQuest, if anybody
Hmm.
knows what RuneQuest or Glorantha mean. And there was a game called Dragon Pass, and eventually wound up buying another copy of it. But I wish I had the original because I had a now almost impossible to get precursor to the game that became Dragon Pass. So
Right.
anyway, there's that sort of thing. But I think that's inevitable, and that's I think just part of maturity to say,
Sure, sure, sure.
that's get rid of
No, no. I
things. You're going to
mean,
wind up, having a little bit of seller's remorse
oh,
or
sure.
donators remorse
Oh,
at some
sure.
point.
Yes.
Um, did you get any new merch based on episodes that we did?
So the only merch that I think based on episode things you got me as gifts, unless you count, I have gotten some books, as I mentioned earlier, that were either linked to possible future podcasts or just because of the podcast. And then, I have purchased a few more physical DVD, Blu-rays than I would have. I think both having physical books and physical media when I had been predisposed for a while to just do either in the cloud for movies or maybe Kindle for books. And I think again, it's part of it is I have plenty of space now, so I don't really
Hmm.
don't worry about it as much. I mean, nothing triggers a purge like having to move. So,
Right.
but I
I don't
haven't.
I don't think you should count books because sometimes
Yeah,
we get books as research for
right.
podcast.
I don't know that I've purchased that I can think of. I don't think I've purchased anything specifically merchy because of the podcast to this point.
Yeah, I really haven't purchased much. I mean, I bought an Andor t-shirt.
Right,
I have friends everywhere. That
right,
was a little irresistible for me.
right.
But not really much else that I can think of.
I will confess that I have looked a couple of times for certain things. I've only been in limited circumstances where
Right.
I was at a bookstore that had some, the Funko Pop things, and I can't remember who I was looking for, but there was something that if I'd found, I might have been willing to buy, or I wouldn't mind some Starship models that I think, in parts, just talking about this. But again, I had to find them in a certain context. It's not like I'm gonna go on Amazon today and buy a Enterprise D or whatever. But if I found one
Right.
this year, I might buy it because all this talk about it.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about looking ahead. What do you look forward to
Oh, I'm
most
I'm quitting the
discussing?
podcast as of date, Tom. I'm sorry. Did I not tell you that?
Oh, okay.
No,
Looking forward to not doing this
that's
podcast.
right. That's right.
Uh, so, what do you look forward to most discussing in future episodes?
I think, I mean, there's a lot of Star Trek I want to talk about, so I'm looking forward to that sort of
Yeah,
generically.
me
I'm
too.
looking forward to series two of Blake Seven, which I have the DVD right here.
I know, and I've got the DVD
The
over here.
Blu-ray, the Blu-ray.
Yeah.
DVD is an old man thing. Blu-ray. Um, and I think just a when we I won't go down the list, but there are a bunch of movies that we have talked about discussing, and I know there's a little books
Hmm.
that I want to talk about, so
Right.
there's just a lot to talk about. Um, those are the
Yeah.
main things on my mind at the moment.
Right. So I'm looking forward to there's a lot of movies from like the classic era
Yeah.
that I posted about on Substack. I mean, there's so many of those movies
Yes.
from like 1977 through 1987.
Yes. Yes.
But also like a lot of even like some earlier movies too, during this period of 70s science fiction, which had a very distinctive feel to it. And you
Yes.
know, spoiler alert, we are going to be doing one of those movies very soon here.
Yes.
Uh, I think probably I said more written works. I'd like to do more books.
Yeah.
Um, I have a kind of an urge to talk about things that are noble failures, where somebody
Hmm.
really tried and it didn't kind of maybe gel as well as it should have, but it's still worth calling out in case other people want to see
Hmm.
it. I mean, saying want to do more things that are obscure and introduce people to things they haven't heard about
Right.
before or took a pass on because they like Godzilla movies because they
Right.
got a bad first impression of them, or people told them they were too
Right.
goofy to bother with. But
Right.
like noble failures, like I think um, talking about like science fiction movies in the 1970s, John Carpenter's student movie that became a theatrical length movie, Dark Star.
Hmm.
It's not the greatest movie ever made. It's certainly very imaginative, very different. That's the sort of thing. Like if we can squeeze one of those in every once in a while, that would be
Sure.
fun.
I mean, I will say on the book thing, I am looking Asimov's high on my list. Although I'm based on some of my own rereading a few years ago, it may be something that I find that I don't love like I did. I'm kind of
Yeah.
curious. I had rewound Foundation. I found it a book that I loved as a kid, kind of boring,
Hmm.
and I'm kind of curious about the robot stories, which I also loved, whether they hold up after all these years. That's something that I think is something I really would like to do soon.
Yeah. And I agree with you strongly about Star Trek. I mean, I'm really looking forward to us to do the different seasons of Star Trek: The Next Generation. I
Hmm.
mean, that is such a in an interesting way that I'm realizing more as we talk about Star Trek and other things
Hmm.
on the podcast, kind of pivotal. Uh,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
yeah,
For sure.
yeah, and that's one where we'll have certainly mixed opinions about, especially the first season. But there will be much to discuss
Oh,
there.
I have strong opinions, but
Yeah.
that have grown over the years.
Well, like
Um,
I
and
occasionally, yeah, go ahead.
I know you're looking forward to Xena Warrior Princess. That's one that
Oh,
really,
absolutely. That's a fun show. I enjoy Xena
I
Warrior
see. I
Princess.
never watched it. There was a whole that whole raft of the Hercules stuff that I never really. I watched a little bit of it, but anyway, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, that's to be like my. I enjoy that in the same way I enjoy the B science fiction movies of
Sure,
the
sure,
of the
sure, sure.
50s. But anyway, like since I do like catch clips on YouTube every once in a while, there was the one where the Romulans bait the Enterprise into the neutral zone,
Hmm.
and Tomalak, the
Oh
Romulan
yeah.
commander, is sort of gloating. And
Yes.
watching that scene and saying, "Damn, that's good."
Yeah, I
I
know.
can't wait to talk about this.
Uh, um, Tomalak was great.
Yes.
There was not enough Tomalak.
Yeah.
Andreas Katsalousis, if I get
Yeah.
he was fantastic.
Now he was great in Babylon
I
5
was
too.
absolutely phenomenal in Babylon 5.
That's what that's one I'm really eager to
I
talk
want
about.
to do Babylon 5.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a little more of our adulthood, but still, I loved Babylon 5, and I'd like to talk about it.
Yeah. Anything about the podcast itself that you want to tweak?
You know, I feel like this is like a production meeting question, but I wonder, and I'd be open to again any listener who'd want to comment. I mean, There are times I think maybe we should tighten things up a little bit, but I also enjoy sort of finding the conversation in the moment and having the freewheeling
Yeah.
conversation that we have. So I wonder about that, because I try to have an outline, but sometimes it sticks and sometimes it doesn't. Um, and I have fantasies about integrating clips, but A, it's a lot of work and I thus all the legal issues. I know a lot of podcasts use them, but I don't, there's always that worry about that. And I wouldn't mind doing maybe some kind of, I don't know, ancillary video stuff to put on YouTube, but that's just all kind of fantasies. How about yourself?
Yeah. I think probably the length is pretty good. I mean, my own sense of what a good length is based on listening to other podcasts. And
Sure.
often I'll listen to things where it's clear the podcasters have more to say and they cut it short. And
Hmm.
I kind of regret that.
Sure.
I don't have like a particular personal definition of what is the right length other than you've talked through the topic enough that you feel satisfied you've
Hmm.
said what you think
Sure.
is important about it. I'll often listen to podcasts that go on for like 2 hours,
Yeah,
3 hours. That's obviously too far out there, and in part because they meander, right? They get
yeah,
off
yeah.
topic all the time, and
Right.
I think we stick to the topic pretty strictly. Um, any other aspects of our vast media empire you'd like to highlight?
I mean, I would like to be more active on social media, but I'm not. It's just a time thing.
Yeah.
I mean, Marshall, I would like to find ways. I'm not obsessed with how many people listen. I would like to expand the audience. I don't know how to do that, and it may not be possible. I would beg anybody listening who's gotten this far, if you haven't left a review on any of the podcast apps, and very few reviews have been left, we'd appreciate it very much. I know that helps get attention. I'd like to find more ways to get feedback. I may regret asking for it because I know how that goes
Oh
too.
yeah.
But
Yeah.
I would like more feedback, and I would like to do. I part again, not to time is time, and there are a lot of things in my head I want to put on the Substack I haven't done yet. So I do appreciate that outlet, and that was your idea. It was a good idea. And
And people do respond.
yeah,
That's what I like about that
we actually
particular
get
platform.
feedback there. That
Yeah.
so I hope that expands over time, both in my own output and both in response. So
Right.
those are the things that are I think on my mind.
Yeah, I mean, if I had a New Year's resolution, it would be to post more often on Substack. And, it was tough for a while because of my travel and
Right.
the holidays, but also, to be honest, just the production schedule of doing an episode a week.
Yes.
Then, kind of doing the background work for an episode and then squeezing out a post on Substack is a little challenging. So I had to figure out the trick there.
Well, yeah. I mean, again, I write quite a bit on Outside the Beltway about politics, and so that tends to take up what writing time I have in a given day.
Right.
I mean, I could sit here and write all day long, but there are other things that have to be done. Both, I mean, this golf has got to be happening, and there's also like stuff that has to be done, and prep for the podcast, and a whole list of other things because life is rich, so it's all good. But yeah, we'll see how things progress.
Okay. Well, that wraps up our retrospective on the first 50 episodes of Ancient Geeks.
Number 50. It's always a collector's
Number
item
with a bullet. All right.
with a bullet. Yes.
This is the episode that or the issue, as we were often saying, that was drawn by Neil Adams, so it's highly collectible.
At least the cover.
At least the cover. All right. Thanks for listening.
Take care.
Here we go, blasting off to episode 51 and beyond. Thanks for listening. Please like and subscribe and drop us a review on the podcast app or platform of your choice. If you want to contact us directly, drop us a line at someancientgeeks@gmail.com. And also look for us on our Substack blog, someancientgeek.substack.com, where we post all kinds of things. Musings about geek culture, jokes, you name it. You'll also find us on Reddit, Facebook, and Blue Sky. All contents copyright 2025, Tom Grant and Stephen Taylor. Music by Reversed Image, whom you can find on Pixabay. See you next time.
So, I decided to go to Morganville, which is what they call Shelbyville in those days. So I tied an onion to my belt, which was the style at the time.
Let me do that over.
Yeah.
That was not good.